first presentation, and it's staying with Amazon. We're really going to talk about, well, today really making there's so many purchases. I mean, people, customers, we all know this, they do a lot of searching before they buy something, and it tends to be on Google and Amazon. So what we're going to have today is kind of find out the best practices for doing this. And we have Eric Moretti. He is the Performance Digital Marketing Manager at the Scott's Miracle-Gro Company. Okay, Eric? Is he? Oh, there you are. Welcome, Eric. Oh, you don't have.
Well,
you're right. Okay.
Well, I'm glad I'm not talking about anything controversial today. There's a couple of slides or a couple of things that I mentioned this before, but obviously we all know that digital isn't shrinking. My nickname for this slide is the job security slide, in that we're going to continue to grow into search in general. And it's going to continue to be a larger percentage of total media spend. And the big growers there, Google obviously dominates from a total market share, but Amazon is growing pretty quickly. And the best part about search is almost all of our customers are going to do it at some point, whether that's where they start their journey or that's where our other advertising leads them to. Almost 90% of them are going to perform some search action. Excuse me. 50% of product searches will end up on Amazon, 50% will start with Google, and that'll lead to roughly 15% of our sales on an e-commerce channel, half of which is going to be Amazon, and the rest is going to end up in retail. Of course, the nice part about that is Amazon and Google are seen as very favorable. Surprisingly to me, more so than Apple, maybe not surprising compared to Facebook. And a large part of the Amazon advertising experience is either a benefit or unobtrusive to the customer. So they're comfortable with the advertising. But of course, we've talked about attribution, a couple of things, and we'd all like to get more than 15% of credit for the work that we do. And if we're looking at last click attribution, we're not looking at our retail sales, or we miss those, that's what we're going to end up with. But the offline sales can dramatically fluctuate depending on your type of business or your model. So apologies to Purple, I picked these at random. But if you're Casper, Apple, or Hoover, how your search performs, whether it's direct or in-store or through your e-commerce platform, is going to be wildly different. As much as perhaps 60% of your Amazon spend is going to be seen outside of the Amazon platform. And Google will tell you the same thing. Depending on the type of retailer you are, your offline impact is going to vary as well. However, even though we talk about retail being 85% of sales, most of your growth is going to start to happen with e-commerce. If you're taking a typical retail growth at 2% and e-commerce growth at 17%, which is the average, 60% of your growth this year is going to come from an e-commerce platform. So we want to keep in mind the retail or the traditional platform, but also know that most of our growth is going to happen in e-commerce. So how do you figure out where to spend? Well, this is a very confusing slide because you've got a couple of different things going on. And there's more than one path. If you have a large catalog site, Scott's has well over 400 different products between Scott's, Miracle-Gro, Roundup, Ortho, Tomcat, and even more when you look at some of our subsidiaries. It's easy for us to play in all of these channels. However, we've got a couple of different things that we'll talk about that lend us to lean into one more than the other before we even start talking about the return. It comes down to opportunity. Whether we're taking a look at competitive protection, trying to make sure that we have adequate representation on a search platform because that's where our customers are going to be, whether it's because we don't have e-commerce opportunities with some of our platforms, so that shifts our mix as well, or we have different goals, whether we're trying to grow category share, whether we're trying to be profitable, or whether we're trying to maintain. That affects how we look at Amazon, how we look at traditional text, and how we look at shopping placements. So a good example of this for us is our live plants division, Bonnie Plants, doesn't do e-commerce sales, which immediately tells me I'm probably not going to be too worried, or I can't do shopping, but I'm going to lean into text and a little bit of Amazon. So our ability to ship some products and work with Amazon for Bonnie Plants is easier for us than it is for us to launch an e-commerce site for them because obviously they're plants. They're a little bit more fickle. So how do we figure out all the impact of our search dollars? Again, we've talked about media mix modeling before in some of the other presentations, but what does a dollar in do for me versus what does it do for Google? We take a look at all of our platforms, all of our data points to understand what that means, and then we take a look at what is our goal for that particular brand. Are we trying to grow Amazon? Are we trying to maintain a sales velocity? Are we trying to protect shelf space at a retailer? Do we have competitive intrusion between all of our different brands? Or are we just trying to grow direct sales? So we take a look at all of this and try and come up with a strategy for that particular brand and look at how this mix varies and adjust from there. So this is a good example of trying to figure out how much we should be leaning into a particular channel or platform. If we start with a campaign that spends $100 and has a $10 ROAS, and we have a 50% share of voice, that kind of looks like scenario A, right? Really good profitability, middling share of voice, but not so much trying to grow the channel or grow our category share. So we start leaning in towards scenario B. We've spent $150 and we have an $8 ROAS, but our share of voice has gone up to 60%. That incremental lift in sales really comes at a $4 ROAS. So we're losing a little bit of profitability, but we're gaining share of voice. We take that a little bit further and we go to scenario C. We want more share of voice. We want to grow sales. We want sales growth, but at the end of the day, we're going to give up some profitability. That incremental growth is going to come at a $2.50 ROAS. So really, what is it you're looking for from the platform and your dollar? So a couple of key takeaways from this. Knowing your limitations helps. It's easy to pick and choose when you can rule some things off the bat, or you know that it's going to take some time to adapt later on. There's more than one way to measure success. Whether you're looking at profitability, whether you're looking at category share, channel growth, or direct sales, backing into those goals from understanding your media mix helps you understand where you're going to put dollars in Amazon or Google. And of course, the last one, the best one, is there's still more growth in search, so we'll be continuing to do this for probably the foreseeable future. So a good story there. That's all I had.
Thanks, Eric. And we're going to hear more from Eric because he's going to be part of our next panel, so we can ask questions. So if you want to stay up there. And we're going to continue the conversation on this panel. Basically, we know that Amazon has a lot of opportunities, but it also has a lot of challenges. And that's what this panel is going to do. They're going to discuss it and maybe help us finally determine, is Amazon a partner or a frenemy, or maybe something in between. So if we can have everyone come up. And this is going to be moderated by Carrie Curran, and she is from Group M Performances. She is the Director of Marketing and Growth there at Group M, And she's been doing this over 18 years in business development and digital marketing, and she's also driven lots of business results through search and social channels across a lot of industries, including Fortune 1000 clients like P&G, American Express, and Kraft. So Carrie, welcome, and everyone.
Each of you introduce yourselves and just explain a little bit about how your role interacts with the Amazon strategies and execution.
Sure. So, hey everyone, I'm Mark Kapczynski. Recently became the CMO of a company called Wrench. So we don't sell wrenches, we actually deliver car care to your home and office. So we actually fix vehicles for a living, as well as maintain them. And the tie-in with Amazon for us is Amazon is a huge source of business for us in terms of if you buy auto parts on Amazon for your vehicle, someone usually has to install those parts. And so they're a great, actually, lead gen source for us into our business. So when you need an expert installation, Amazon's usually one of the sources that's fueling that for us.
Great. Eric?
So, of course, I'm Eric Moretti, Performance Digital Marketing Manager at Scott's, or really Scott's Miracle-Gro, and that's has quite a few brands in there. Of course, Scott's and Miracle-Gro, but also Roundup, Ortho, and Tomcat, which is mouse traps, if you're not familiar with the brand.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. Christina Smith, Keen Footwear. I'm the Director of Digital Marketing at Keen. When I was hired about 2.5 years ago, I was hired into the e-commerce team. And about 18 months ago, we had a reorg, and we're now actually calling ourselves the D2C team. Previously, my role would have been to drive all of the performance media for KeenFootwear.com. But with that reorg and the addition of the DTC lens, Amazon marketing also became part of my remit. So, and any other third-party marketplaces we're dipping our toes into, but certainly for us, Amazon is the biggest player at the moment. So that's why I'm sitting up here right now.
Great. So obviously the landscape has changed very rapidly as Amazon has become an increasingly dominant player across digital strategies. Can you just talk about kind of how that has shifted and changed within your organization and how it's affected channel allocation, strategy, and kind of from there? Okay, Christina, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start, just kind of piggyback off of my intro, actually. So Keen Footwear is a wholesaler by history, I guess. We've been around for about 16, almost 17 years now, and the e-commerce capability, the .com, if you will, has only been in existence for about 4 years. And truthfully, we've probably really only taken the interwebs seriously for about 3 years. And so historically, Amazon was managed, and that means both the price, selection, availability, merchandising, and marketing through our wholesale team, who bless their hearts, don't know a lot about digital marketing. So that definitely left a lot of money on the table in terms of being able to get our brand in front of consumers, in front of potential customers. And during the reorg that happened about 18 months ago, I think that was definitely a gap in the capability with Amazon that was observed. Amazon is not a Nordstrom or an REI or a Dick's or a Cabela's for us, and it is definitely a beast that deserves to be treated vastly differently, not only because of the nature of how they operate and how their organization is set up and their technology, but just our overall relationship. And so with that reorg, while I now partner very closely with wholesale in understanding what product selection, availability, and pricing needs to look like, we have an individual who sits within the e-commerce team who's responsible for the merchandising piece on Amazon, and then myself for the marketing piece. So we've gone from basically 0 to 60 in the span of the past 18 months.
So Scott's is a little bit older. They're about 150 years old. It was started by a Civil War veteran. So, O.M. Scott, yep. So the original store is actually still in downtown Marysville, Ohio. But we've actually probably been walking down the same direct sale path for about the same time as Keen. So a little bit prior to joining Scott's myself, they went from one URL to a URL for every single brand and launching direct sales to kind of move into the .com era, so to speak, for those brands. So quite a bit of adaptation and change there. And kind of concurrently as we started to roll into e-commerce sales, we started to lean into Amazon or test into Amazon, and that has grown quite a bit over the past 3 years.
Yeah, and for us, as I mentioned, we started with Amazon as a partner in terms of driving service business for us. And as we start to evolve our business into not just one-time services or one-time repairs, into more of a subscription type of model, what we're trying to analyze and figure out is how do we productize what we have so that we can actually sell it on Amazon. So we're now looking at how do we create a physical good that can be combined with a subscription into a year product offering that we can then start to market heavy on Amazon. And for us, a big piece of our forward-looking strategy is to make sure that we can actively sell on Amazon. So taking our service business and now seeing if we can productize it.
So how are you guys seeing the partnership internally between the teams that are doing the merchandising or the wholesale relationships and the digital marketing? Like, are you starting, it sounds like, Christina, you guys are starting to integrate better, but how is that maybe working, and then what are some of the challenges you're seeing?
Yeah, we're definitely integrating better, but there's still a lot of who's on first conversations, so to speak, and a lot of that, if you will, and that's I think that's actually perfectly fine, because this is the first time, quite frankly, in the history of our company where wholesale and e-commerce have actually partnered in this way. So there's definitely some growing pains, and I think they're good growing pains. It's forcing the right conversations about what the strategy and approach for our business should actually look like, what the organization for Amazon should actually look like. Should it just be this, Frankenstein of individuals from other parts of the org kind of coming together for Amazon, or should there be dedicated individuals with dedicated P&L, with dedicated budgets, so that we're actually giving it the due justice that it deserves? So, quite frankly, I don't have the answers to those questions right now, but the fact that we're even asking those questions internally right now versus, even 6 months or a year ago, I think is a massive step in the right direction for us.
Yeah, I would say Scott's is similar in that, as you go back 4 or 5 years ago, it was a largely brand-driven organization. And so the D2C and e-commerce teams have grown pretty rapidly. And it's been a lot of, not turf wars, but wanting to understand what's going on and what the goals and objectives are in the channel and how those have shifted as we've moved into e-commerce. A lot of this stuff has helped everyone understand is some of the stuff that we talked about today is, yes, we spend money on Amazon, but it does lead to sales in our retail channels as well.
I have to say really quickly to piggyback on that, one of the strongest e-com days we had in the summertime, which while we do typically have strong sales because of our summer line and our winter shoes, we saw a tremendous uptick in .com performance for our brand on Prime Day. And that was unintentional at the time, but now that we know what happened, we are definitely going to be intentionally planning for that next year. We're a little behind the times, but we're getting there. We're getting there.
And on that note, Eric, did you see any lift there as well on Prime Day on your .com? That's an interesting connection.
A little bit, but mainly so more in Amazon and just general search traffic as well.
Interesting. And Mark, how are you guys integrating your teams?
Yeah, it's
all on you, right?
It's not
It's
so
the
much
CMO.
integrating. It's really more shifting.
Yeah.
So we've had this service-based business for 3.5 years now, and we it's very much like a lead comes in and we can fulfill on it, schedule it, book it, deliver the service. And now we have to take more of an e-commerce mindset to the business, which is every service and every component of our service has to be like a SKU in an e-commerce environment, and then enable us to be able to sell differently so that we can sell packages of things versus, hey, here's just send a technician out to take care of the vehicle and that's it. So it's really shifting the whole mindset in the company from, hey, we're just a service provider to we're a product company.
Great. While we're talking about team integration, do you guys have any advice for the brands out in the audience that maybe that always seems to be a question that comes up. So any advice or recommendations that they can bring back to their teams for crossing the party lines?
So many things. I think, Eric, you said it's not a turf war.
Yeah.
We're just trying to figure it out. And I think that's very true for Keen. And so I think having that mindset of it's not a us versus them, an e-com versus wholesale mentality has definitely, I think, helped everyone keep their sanity. You know, at the end of the day, we're trying to generate revenue for Keen with a capital K, not our wholesale team, not our e-commerce team, but the company as a whole. And so I think starting with the right mindset and making sure that the KPIs that you agree on are serving all parties is absolutely the starting point. And then I think having, not that we're doing this, but having clearly defined roles and responsibilities and a clearly defined P&L is, for me at least, the big components of what we still need to close the gap on. We've got, marketing budget sitting in P&L and the wholesale team. The agency budget that does the work for us sits within my GL, and these are two vastly different parts of the org. We've got headcount, cost of headcount in probably 5 different GLs right now. And so we don't actually, and I don't think anyone truly appreciates the true cost of running this business. We see the revenue easily, but we don't understand the true cost. And so I think for us, those are probably some of the big ticket items we have to solve for, and quite frankly, just the next 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I talked a little bit how we set different goals based on the numbers that we see, whether it's sales on Amazon or direct sales, or sales on our retail partners. But at the end of the day, everything gets judged on sales in general. And so I think that is key to keep in mind and make sure that everybody understands all of those components. I would say the other thing, just from a search perspective, is it takes a lot of over communication to people that don't live and breathe search to understand, what you're doing. And so the more time that you can spend with people that aren't in search and understand what they're looking for and how they think about things, the better and easier it is for you to translate their questions into a search framework and help them understand what you're doing.
Yeah, I think for us, what's kind of the unique challenge is, at the end of the day, we actually send a technician out to your home or office to perform a piece of work. It's not like just shipping a product to someone through UPS or FedEx. So we have really constantly, from a performance marketing standpoint, be monitoring utilization and availability of our technicians, and constantly be, today we're completely booked up. We have to now turn off certain channels or certain markets just because we'll be over capacity.
That's a good problem to have, right?
It's a good problem to have, so we just got to hire more technicians.
Yeah, excellent. So we talked a bit about integrating your internal teams, but let's shift a little bit and talk about how you're integrating your marketing and digital performance strategies. Are you guys starting to look at how you're managing Amazon strategy and budget alongside Google and other platforms, and kind of what are you able to achieve there?
Okay. So I would say we take a pretty holistic look and understand how everything is working together. Whether we're comparing Amazon search or Google search or AMG Media and other channels, we try to take a look at how everything performs against, I don't want to say the word traditional, because then we start thinking about things that aren't digital, but more traditional digital channels.
Yeah, I think for us, search has been so strong at showing consumer intent, and there's such an immediacy to what people want from us. So as we start to not shift, but really layer on these extra kind of products and services that we can offer, we now have to start to figure out, okay, how does advertising on Amazon and growing a subscription type of business start to affect our overall ratios?
This is kind of a hard question because I think about some of the intrinsic challenges we have at the company right now. I hate to keep going back to something as boring as like finance and accounting, but the forced segmentation we have of our budgets right now, and I think in the two presentations ago with the question about who's got a performance budget and who's got a brand budget, for us there's a brand budget and a performance budget, and there's a budget for our wholesale partners as well, which is neither of these things. Definitely adds a layer of complexity. In a perfect world, I would simply be looking at ensuring that every dollar that I spend of the company's money is generating the most efficient return or CPA as it possibly could. But right now, with that segmentation of these budgets, that's not exactly the lens that we're looking at, which quite frankly is really unfortunate. But I think we will get there, because I do think that if we start to look at a more holistic point of view of that full media mix, that is definitely going to force some efficiencies in our approach and our processes and our results that we don't currently have. But there is, quite frankly, there's a little bit of tail wagging the dog right now in terms of our accounting team, our accounting partners, simply not having the lens of which they need to be looking at our business. So we've got a little bit of kind of administrative legwork to do, I think, to really get to that point that I'd like to be at.
I would say the only thing that I would add to that is I talked a little bit about e-commerce growth and retail versus traditional, and it's really easy to think of retail as retail and not e-commerce growth, but in reality, we have partners from Home Depot here, and we need to consider their e-commerce growth as e-commerce growth, not retail growth, because that's ultimately where the channel is going. It is retail e-commerce growth as opposed to retail in-store growth.
Right. And do you look at KPIs within channels to, I think it was brought up earlier that a lot of e-com drives in-store, a lot of Amazon drives .com. Are you able to look at that holistically, looking at the halo effect and looking at maybe budget fluidity to kind of drive all aspects? How is that working?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely going to have to be a key component for us next year. It was pure happenstance this past year that we had a summer sale scheduled at about the same time. I think we ended up starting before, we came in a few days after the Prime sale started. It's going to be intentional this year that we're doing that. Yeah. And I think to take it a step further, it was happenstance that we happened to be selling at discount some of the same products on Amazon. So we got lucky. Yeah. But, lucky only gets you so far. So certainly thinking about, mid-July of next year, there's going to be intention behind what we do in terms of the timing of the sale, in terms of the products that we select, in terms of the media that we put behind it. And that's for both e-commerce and Amazon. We'd love to see a more holistic approach. And quite frankly, I don't know if that holistic approach means we're selling the exact same product at the exact same price and then just letting the customer decide where they really want to transact, or if it means we're actually going to take a segmented approach and go, all right, well, these products on the keenfootwear.com site is going to be, on sale. These products, which were different on Amazon, is what we'll be putting on sale. Haven't actually thought that far in advance. In some ways, that's not my call to make. I can only provide data to help my partners make those decisions. But I think at the very least, the fact that it's going to be intentional next year is going to be a massive step forward for us.
Yeah, I would say it's, we've been, during my tenure, so it may have not been intentional at some point, but it's intentional for how we think of some of those key Amazon events, whether it's Prime Day or Black Friday or Cyber Monday. We try to measure quite a bit and try to understand what we're doing on Amazon. What's the value of Amazon? Are we okay and comfortable with that? But then also, again, what's the total value of that dollar driving, and what's the impact to retail stores, whether you're in Home Depot and shopping on Amazon just to do a price check, or you decided you needed that product right now, and so you went to Home Depot or Lowe's to buy it.
Yeah, I think for us, it's interesting because we are sort of this national digital company, but at the same time we operate very locally. Mm-hmm. And so while we're in a number of markets all across the United States, things like Yelp and GMBs really play a huge impact into our business. Yeah. And so what we're trying to figure out is the correlation between how are we advertising on Yelp and managing our profile pages there to then lead both to the immediate services that people need, mm-hmm. as well as now into these subscription offerings. So trying to figure out those relationships has really been key for us.
Great. And we had talked a bit about the Amazon DSP when we connected earlier. How are you guys, as Amazon's trying to push that more and more for the endemic and non-endemic brands, how are you seeing that impact your actual conversions? Is there alignment between your increase in the DSP investment and the actual sales?
I would say for us, and the little bit that I've started to manage in the past 2.5 months, that's definitely the case. Mm-hmm. I'll have a better answer for you next year. Obviously, our business is, for the most part, very seasonal, and that season will probably start to pick up in March.
We just started testing DSP to drive traffic to Amazon by now probably pushing 6 weeks ago. And we've seen some very positive results. And I mean positive vis-a-vis the other type of advertising that we're running on Amazon right now. While the CPCs or CPM, however you wish to look at it, relatively speaking, are quite high. The overall CTR and conversion has been shockingly good, to the point that it is actually giving me cause for pause in terms of what that means for budget allocation across all of the different types of levers we're pulling for advertising, so on or to Amazon.com. And it's been good enough to give me cause for pause in terms of thinking about testing DSP next year to drive traffic to keenfootwear.com. I'm definitely going to give it a go. Well, I have no idea what the results are going to be. It's been an interesting conversation with Amazon because, as you can imagine, the sales individuals that we're working with, they quite frankly don't care where the click lands. They're just probably looking at their commission check, and I get that. I was in sales at one point, so I totally understand that. But it's definitely been an interesting conversation about what I think the bifurcation in performance will be of clicks landing on Amazon versus clicks landing on Keen Footwear, and at least hyperbolically speaking, they actually believe that performance could be even stronger on keenfootwear.com. They've said they don't see a lot of increase in performance, even though in the ad units themselves now, there's an Amazon logo as part of the product that we're displaying, which personally really surprises me. And I don't know if I should be connecting dots to imply that that's potentially some of the backlash that I think is starting to happen with Amazon as an advertiser and as a retailer. Probably not going to think about it too much just yet, to be really honest with you, but interesting little nugget that was shared with me. But net, it's just another arrow in the quiver to test, see what happens. I think for us the biggest challenge is, we operate on a CPA model for Keen Footwear for new customers, but that's not a lens with which we can apply for Amazon advertising, which is a ridiculous challenge for us. And so it feels like I've had to take a few steps back in terms of that performing marketing lens relative to our own .com advertising. But we'll just have to see where things land. It's, test and learn, just like everything in this industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, the big challenge, again, is trying to take a service and turn it into a product that we can sell. So the initial testing we've done is with partners that have specific devices or specific parts that we can tag along a service to. And, certainly it's good at cultivating new customers, that I think we'll see down the road. But, our business is so centered on the immediacy. I have an immediate problem that needs to be resolved. And so we're not seeing that type of business yet.
Yeah, that's interesting, right? Because the brand building isn't going, you'll be familiar with the brand, but you don't need it until you actually have a problem.
So we have this continuous stay top of mind until you actually need us.
Yeah, interesting. So on the Amazon front, as Amazon's opened up the API in the last about 18 months, we've seen a huge growth in Amazon technology partners. And it's kind of a crowded marketplace, right? You've got your DSPs, or your DMPs, your syndication partners, you've got your media buying partners, you've got your analytics partners, you've got some of them that can do two of those things, some of them do all three of those things. I mean, frankly, we get an email or a call probably on a weekly basis with a new technology that wants to partner with us. So how do you guys navigate that and kind of choose which partners are the best fit for different aspects and kind of how they overlap, and how are you navigating that landscape?
Well, I know Christina and I were kind of joking earlier about getting used to Amazon searches, like having flashbacks to Google 2009. And so it's, it has evolved quite a bit, I think, in the past year, just from a platform interface perspective. We certainly have a ton of those challenges at Scott's between all of our different brands, platforms, media, and media partners as well. We have a couple of different things like backend that enable us to get into more reporting and analytics, and we'll take in quite a few different data sources to manage that chaos. But managing that in and of itself is hard too, just because now you're trying to think about what's the equivalent of a click from a metric standpoint across Amazon, Google, Facebook, continuing on and on. So that mapping takes quite a bit of time, but it is certainly a challenge.
I don't think I can say anything else that makes any more sense than what Eric just said.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, I think I'm in the fortunate situation that our technology and engineering team is incredibly strong. And so we've been able to kind of take the approach of, as long as everything has a webhook, that we can just pull data into our own environment and then manage it and track it all there. At least we're the central point of consolidation.
Yeah.
And then we can use whatever kind of reporting tools and stuff to then manage or watch data changes in real time and then take action on it in whatever appropriate tool we're then using to buy media or so on.
Excellent, great. And so obviously Amazon is kind of the behemoth, but the other retailers are starting to invest more and more in opportunities for brands to advertise and drive sales. And I think we're starting to see, Walmart pick up the pace. I always think back to when Yahoo was the big search engine back in 2000, and you're like, oh, no one could ever take Yahoo's market share. So I do think Amazon should see the other retailers as a threat. From that perspective, how are you able to kind of integrate your planning, look at how you're marketing across the different retailers, bring the other retailers into your strategy? I know Home Depot's here, and Eric, you mentioned Home Depot, and when there's partners that allow you to do the advertising, either direct for Walmart, and I know there's a few platforms that are going to allow you to manage Amazon alongside with Walmart starting in next year. So how are you guys kind of thinking about that?
I think for me it's, and for our organization, it's something that is quickly having to evolve. As I mentioned before, it wasn't too long ago where we had one URL and didn't have any e-commerce sales, and now we're talking about direct sales across all of our partners, or all of our brands and Amazon, which started a little bit more internally or within our D2C organization as opposed to how our traditional retailer relationships have. So it's an evolving relationship. We try to share data and work with our retail partners to kind of make sure that we get the same data points and talk in the same language, because they're growing too, and as you talked about Yahoo, it's not inconceivable that they'll be growing as much as Amazon in that case as well.
I'll just add, certainly as a footwear retailer, we have an easy button with Zappos that we can push, which is certainly quite helpful for a multitude of reasons. We've been active on their site in terms of selling for years now, not so much on the advertising piece. And so I think that's probably going to be a nut for us to crack in 2020. And it's not because it's overly complex, it's just bandwidth and budget restrictions. But I would love to be able to carve out, even just a little bit of money to spend to see what could possibly happen there. I think for me, the other interesting platform that doesn't seem to get a lot of talk these days, but I think maybe next year it will, is Target.
Yeah.
They've got a third-party marketplace.
Yeah.
And certainly, I think, some of the articles that have come out about their holiday performance in general, 2019 performance this past year, I think a lot of brands might be looking at them in a more positive light than previously as a potential marketplace partner. And at least I know that for some of our more casual footwear lines, for lack of a better way of putting it, we know that the people that are buying those shoes are Target moms. And I don't mean that in a bad way. That's a great thing, actually, when you think about what that demographic, psychographic profile actually looks like. So I think for us, Target's going to have to be on the roadmap at some point for next year.
Yeah, and as we look to expand, I mean, our number one goal, obviously, is anytime you're thinking about your vehicle and needing some kind of care or service for it, right, we want you to think of Wrench. And so, obviously, we're starting with some of the largest retailers. There's obviously a lot of specialty retailers that we have to deal with, but then we have this really interesting challenge that I'm fascinated with, which is how do we crack the local markets as well, and are there local retailers or local online retailers even that we can try to partner up with to really drive home our brand in those specific markets where we're already delivering services.
Excellent. How are we doing on time, Ari?
Start opening up to questions. I was just going to wait for you guys to
excellent.
settle in a little bit. So
Sure.
Does anyone have any questions for these guys?
There's one back there.
This is Adam Klein with NutriBullet. I just had a question on the brand side with Amazon attribution. Have you guys done anything with attribution, knowing that Amazon is a marketplace and there are probably searches that started at Google that are ending at Amazon? How do you guys tackle that? How do you, I guess, not double count everything there?
If only.
I would say for us, again, that's kind of one of those things that's in the works as we're talking. So have a little bit more information, next year or later.
I have to say that it's a great question. It's the bane of my existence right now because, I am focused on new customer acquisition for Keen Footwear, but I don't have that data point for Amazon, and that is absolutely a massive gap, which that's the thing that makes me nervous thinking about how we continue to push harder in our Amazon business, is making sure that we have not only the data on the Amazon platform, but understanding how it relates and how it ties into our own data. Are we looking at two completely different customers? Is it the exact same person? And if so, what does this mean in terms of how we treat that individual any differently? But right now, we're just not there.
Well, it just goes back to everything's a halo effect, right?
Hello again, it's David from Reprise. Sorry, I think this is my last question for the day, don't worry. We're seeing a big trend of brands having very robust, built-out Amazon store pages. And this question is more for Eric and Christina. Since your brands sell directly on site, what's your strategy for your Amazon store page? Is it a microsite? Is it differentiating in any way? What are the thoughts around that?
I would say I don't know if I'd classify it as a microsite. We certainly have them for all of our brands. Our product strategy, given that it's a little bit more limited just from a UX standpoint than our full website, evolves based on the season. So yeah, I don't know if I could add any more detail or color to that, but that's kind of the general statement.
So within the Keen Footwear brand, we have two large categories. One is our work product boot, or utility as we call it, and the other is kind of just the general traditional hiking and casual boot, just the core Keen brand, if you will. So we have two stores on Amazon right now. I personally have massive problems with that because I don't think the customer appreciates that, the bifurcation of that brand. To them, we're just Keen. But nonetheless, we very much treat those stores just as we do our own site, within certain limitations because of the selection of product, for example. So on the keenfootwear.com site right now, you will start to see next year a substantial push talking about the sustainability and eco-friendliness of a majority of our products in some way, shape, or form. Now, we just have to make sure that that same selection carries over to the Amazon site so that we could replicate that content, because God forbid we talk about how eco-friendly our product is on Amazon and it turns out it's actually not. That probably wouldn't go over so well. So we try very much to kind of mirror where we can and then localize as best as needed to take into account whatever those differences are in terms of product and potentially the consumer themselves.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, actually for Adam, I was speaking with someone because I remember our discussion and I knew this was something you wanted to talk about. It was, I believe it was Aubrey, which I don't know, for Aubrey Sabala. Was it you who was talking to me about this? And there is a way around it. It tends to be a bigger budget. If it's not Aubrey, whoever it is, I will find it in my notes and connect you guys, because there is a way. It just is a little bit, I guess, usually it tends to be a bigger company with a bigger budget. But I can find out more for you. Okay? All right, great, guys. Well, everyone. Oh, we do have one more question.
Hi, guys. Jeff Alderman from Ad Media. So just quick answer, yes or no, on this one. So looking to next year, so is Amazon truly a friend or a strategic growth partner? What do you say? One or the other?
Is there a third option?
It's clearly a strategic growth option for us.
Yeah, I would say strategic growth option.
Same.
Or all of the above.
Depends on what day. All right, anyone else? Okay, great. Well, everyone, again, thank you guys. You guys are wonderful.
Yeah, thank you guys. Great job.
Okay, next we're going to just take a 10-minute, we're going to hear for 10-minute presentation from one of our sponsors, and he is Dennis Yakovich. Am I saying that? Yeskovich? Sorry about that. He's VP Global Product Marketing at Outbrain. And again, he'll have a quick 10-minute presentation, and then we'll break for some coffee. So here we go.
For how we want to inspire people, publishers, and marketers in the near future. I want to give that some historical context first. I think all of us know Mark Andreessen, famous for this quote. Guys, hopefully something I agree with. But there's a quote Mark is also famous for that just doesn't get as much press, and that is, the original of the internet was not building a payment system into the browser. Why do we care about this? Why is this relevant? Well, because Microsoft failed at this, Netscape failed at this, and they tried really hard with companies like MasterCard and the broader financial system. Thankfully, we're all here today because advertising has really become the payment system for the internet. And in my opinion, advertising, if done well, if done natively, if not interrupting the user, can be awesome. What's further amazing is that 25 years ago, these basic protocols were created like TCP, IP, DNS. We still use them today to power the advertising and the technology that works. And we used additional technologies like cookies and JavaScript, which were never intended to be used for advertising, in very creative ways, like identifying users or creating new and interesting ad experiences in JavaScript. And Web 2.0 was born, and some companies that we know well went on to build some businesses around that as well. So some interesting foundation in terms of context for how we got to today. And wow, what an amazing creative environment we all work in. Many of you here in the room today. But from these humble beginnings, we can do things like, with a 74.23473% probability, know that somebody's in the market for a pair of Air Jordans. That's pretty awesome. The downside to that is, as we heard earlier, you have to hit a thank you page to not see these ads. After you've already purchased, or after maybe you're just not considering that and you went and bought a pair of Allbirds. So there's some downsides there. But when users are exposed to suboptimal experiences, whether it's retargeting on the web, or maybe an ad experience on their mobile phone that really kind of bogs it down, whether they do it consciously or subconsciously, they gravitate to places where that experience is a little better. And that's what's worrisome about the open web. There's all this creativity from this technology that was foundational 25 years ago, but with that creativity, we've taken it slightly too far. So what we've been doing is trying to power native on the web in a way that's not as intrusive, that fits the experience. And I'd argue we have ways to go too in many ways. And we're also trying to answer some really difficult questions about the future of the web. The first is, this is a 100-year-old business model in advertising. Simply existed offline, now it's online, in much the same way. Is that sustainable for the web long term? By the way, we won't answer these questions here today in 10 minutes, but happy to chat about them afterward. In addition, is people's personal data, can that continue to be the grease of the wheel, so to speak, that drives the industry forward? Third, is a fragmented web. I'd argue a web where you buy stuff. We heard a lot about that company today. A web where you search for stuff, which has been around for a long time. A web where you socialize with others. And then a web for everybody else. Is that a healthy environment to have essentially 4 different kinds of webs? And then lastly, just to hit on one ethical point, because I think this is so important for our industry. If you have the means to pay out of an intrusive ad experience, anybody that's paid for YouTube Premium and then had that expire and gone back to the regular experience might know what I'm talking about as one example. Is that a good thing for our industry? So as I mentioned, we're not going to solve all these, but Outbrain's mission has not changed. We have one goal only since the company was founded 13 years ago. Help people discover great content. Over the last year, we've been rolling out a whole new experience. It's around 50% of our current network right now, in terms of page views. That experience is card-based, like you see here, and it's a feed of discovery. It's like, hey, if you can't beat Facebook, at least create an experience that people are familiar with on the broader web that's a lot like that. But we also, by the way, we've seen about a 40% increase in engagement on that feed-based experience relative to some of the prior kinds of formats we have that are a bit more static in nature. But it's not enough just to keep people happy and engaged online. We've got to help publishers. I think we all know the history here. Publishers' businesses are under tons of pressure. So we, over the last couple of years and going forward, are going to continue to double down on helping publishers grow their business. What that means is not only the direct revenue that we're driving for them through native advertising, but also putting cards in the feed like you see here on the right-hand side that are subscription-based cards. So we have the insight to understand whether or not a user has a propensity to want to subscribe to publishers' content. We'll put a subscription card in the feed, and we'll try to help the publisher diversify their revenue base. It's so important, in our opinion, for the future of the web. Last, and I'd argue, given the audience in the room, most important, we have got to put the power back in the hands of the marketer. What's great about our network, 70% of all the clicks we see on our network are the publisher's own content that we're personalizing for the user. What does that mean for a marketer? It means that the marketer now has access to insights about what that reader, that user, is really interested in. And not just on the publisher site where that ad might be running, but on all the publishers, the thousands of publishers that we work with today. So we put that insight, that interest in the hands of the marketer. Then, as you'll see this coming year, we're trying to bring new experiences to complement that interest, like carousel and like new video native experiences. And we wrap that all in the feed. So we feel like the web we need to create isn't just one constituent. These things, if we want to make this work, if we want to weave it together, we've got to focus on all three. It's got to be amazing content that we enable users to discover. We've got to help the publishers not only with a direct ad revenue, but grow loyalty. Keep users coming back. Help them grow all their sources of revenue, like subscription, like empowering the direct sales team at the publisher. And then last, we've got to put this power, this interest-based insights that we have access to in the hands of all marketers, and then complement that with new experiences. So for us, this is the web we need to weave. This is what we're talking about in terms of the overall health of the web going forward. We're excited about what's ahead of us. We're excited about some folks in this room that we may be joining forces with in the near future to try to make this happen more quickly. And that was all I had. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer now or outside. Thanks.
Hey, I got it. Yeah, so any questions? Any questions? Anyone? Okay. That's not, it's not uncommon.
Cool.
Because people like to get to the coffee. Yeah. But are you here solo, or you've got a team of folks here,
yeah,
Andrew?
Here with Andrew, who's here.
Yeah, that guy.
And this guy in the back, Steve.
Okay, very good. Thank you for a
Awesome.
succinct, great presentation there. And if you have questions for these guys, grab them here. And thanks for your continued support and presence and all that. We love having you guys.
Awesome.
So.
We're having a great time.
All right,
Thanks,
very
man.
good. Big round of
Cheers.
applause here.
Thank you.
And just like I said, we're going to move to a coffee and networking break, also sponsored by Outbrain. So make your way out, have some networking and some fun. We also have, I think, our friends from Catalyst might be providing something warm for you as well. So enjoy yourselves for about 15, 20 minutes, and we'll be back with more. Thanks. What's that? It's in your room.